Welcome to How to Decorate from Ballard Designs, a weekly podcast all about the trials and triumphs of decorating and redecorating your home. I'm Caroline. I'm on the marketing team.
And I'm Taryn, and I'm a product designer.
I'm Liz. I head up the creative team.
We're your hosts. Join the expert team at Ballard Designs for tips, tricks, and tales from interior designers, stylists, and other talents in the design world.
Plus, we'll answer your decorating dilemmas at the end of each episode.
We love answering your questions, so don't forget to email us at podcast@ballarddesigns.net.
Now, on with the show.
I had that dream again. My small business needs to hire, but I don't use LinkedIn, and I hire an energy vampire. But also, they're a literal vampire. And suddenly, my team is spending all their time sharpening wooden stakes and buying bulk silver and rehearsing ancient chants, and then I wake up.
Don't let hiring nightmares ruin your dreams. LinkedIn Jobs' new AI assistant takes insights from over 1 billion professionals to create a short list of the best fits for you. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/quality. Start hiring today with LinkedIn.
Okay, this week we are delighted to welcome London-based interior designer Nicola Harding to the show. Her work includes everything from high-profile restaurants and boutique hotels to the homes of musicians, artists, and even royalty. Her style blends traditional charm with rich atmosphere and unexpected touches. And today we are thrilled to be discussing her debut book, Homing Instinct. Nicola, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much for having me.
It is morning here. We've all got like fresh cups of coffee, which I think is perfect because your book is so cozy, so layered and textured, and everything one would expect from, that classic English feel. It's layered, it's comfy, inviting, but you throw a few curveballs in there, which I'm excited to talk through.
I think doesn't want to be too predictable, does it? I think little moments of mischief, of the unexpected, keeps it exciting and hopefully, personal, that it feels unique and relevant to whoever's living there.
You have such an unusual path into interior design, which I think would be a great place to start. You talk about it in the introduction to the book. Mm-hmm. So maybe we can start there, because I know that will be something that our audience will really enjoy hearing about.
Well, I've sort of fallen into interior design a little bit by accident. I think it's born out of my obsession with home. The daughter of a helicopter pilot, I moved around a huge amount growing up, and I always hankered after a sense of belonging. I really wanted to feel held by a place, and that a space not only kind of reflected who I am and who I wanted to be, but would help me manifest the life that I wanted to lead. And the place that really spoke to me most deeply was my godfather's house that we would visit, him and his husband growing up. They were teachers in a school in Yorkshire, and they lived in this wonderful, slightly tumbling down house that they packed the rafters full of things that they'd collected. Some things that they'd collected during their travels, during school holidays, and some things that other people were tossing out, and some things that are incredibly precious, like all manner of stuff, but also people, waifs and strays who, for whatever reason, might have fallen out with their own families. They would gather together, and there was just this real sense of warmth, of things and people being loved and looked after and celebrated. And that definitely created a sense of belonging, a sense of ease, a sense that everyone could be the person that they wanted to be. And so I guess, that's what ignited my fascination with the alchemy of what makes a home. And maybe that's not things being too perfect or too deliberate, but celebrating an element of happen chance, which I suppose happens naturally in English interiors, because there's this sense of collecting over time. People perhaps pass things down through generations in a way that there hasn't been such a chance for people to get into the habit of in America. So you get these kind of wonderful accidental combinations that create a sense of ease because it doesn't feel overworked. So yeah, I guess that's where it started was that. And then I was lucky enough whilst I was at university in Edinburgh to do a deal with my dad to persuade him to give me the money that he had saved for my to put towards accommodation whilst I was at university, towards renting. And I used that as a deposit to buy my first flat. That was, there was no central heating. There were 2 bedrooms. I kind of reconfigured it to squeeze a kitchen into 3 cupboards that I knocked together so I could create an extra bedroom to fill the flat with friends to help pay the mortgage. And I scoured local antique shops and started trying out different colors and filled the flat with friends and made them eat whatever I conjured up in the kitchen. And yeah, and that feeling of home was born.
And then you went into garden design.
And then I went into garden design. So yes, I had lots of jobs when I was at university, all sorts of things. I even learned to fly as part of the university air squadron. But one boss that I had, who's still a friend, said to me that you're going to spend more time with the people you work with than anybody else, your friends, your family. So go into an industry where you like the people who work there. And at that time, garden design wasn't fashionable. It was full of all sorts of fascinating people who were intensely passionate about what they did. And that really attracted me. I think the other thing about gardens is that they look their best 10 years after you leave them rather than 10 minutes. And that appealed to my sense of place and atmosphere that I associated with interiors, that actually things take on a life of their own and the people who live there breathe a spirit into it. And I was lucky enough to work with an amazing garden designer called Arnie Maynard, and we worked together for about 6 years and traveled all over the world doing some incredible gardens. And I learned a huge amount from him. I think, among other things, how to imagine big, how to combine classical rules with whimsy. And, he uses sort of handsome structure to define a space, for example, topiary or, clipped hedging, pleached trees, and then layers in a sort of blousy planting with elements of whimsy and mischief in the form of perhaps sort of modern sculpture or a bench painted an unexpected color. And those principles, I guess, are what I've drawn into my interior design, where there's a sort of classic basis, which I think is reassuring. But then there are these, and a sort of handsomeness that comes with that sort of masculine strength, which you might see in the way that the rooms are laid out or joinery and the scale of things, and some handsome materials, textures, but then a sort of more feminine, blousy elements layered in sort of fabrics and accessories, and certainly plenty of whimsy that might be in the form of art or unexpected accessories.
Yeah, your work is so beautiful. It is such a sophisticated take on play and comfort. And I'm wondering, how do you know when enough is too much? Because I wouldn't say that your work is maximalist at all, but it definitely is very full and lived in, and comfortable. But how do you know how much of one style to bring in to a room? Because you're mixing some modern shapes, you're mixing some arts and crafts, you're mixing some big, tufted, rolled armed chairs that are traditional. That balance is just really remarkable.
Oh, I think it's such fun to have all these different elements to play with. And for me, it's very instinctive. I do it by feel. I haven't actually worked with another interior designer. I mean, I've been lucky enough to rub shoulders with all sorts of incredibly talented people, but rather than designers, they're more antiques dealers or curtain makers or art dealers. And wherever I can possibly learn from them, I've been very curious and eager to pick up whatever I can. I think that, those unexpected combinations of things are what makes a space interesting and makes a space feel, authentically connected to the people that live there, because it's not prescriptive. It's not a perfect formula. It's just something that feels right to them and their personal stories, what their past experiences have been, what their interests are. And, really my job, there's something of a matchmaker in it, because a lot of it is listening and unpicking what makes them happy and why and how they want to live their life and hold their families and share their home with their friends. And then it's thinking, okay, what are the ingredients that we can begin to bring together that will be distinctly perfect for this individual, this family?
I think that's really interesting that you are talking about how someone moves through the home, because reading through your book, you talk about some spaces that you've totally flipped the script on the floor plan, especially in where the kitchen lies in the home.
Mm-hmm. I think that, getting the layout right first is the bit that unlocks how a home works for a family or an individual. And, in this country, especially, people are living in houses where people have lived in them for hundreds of years. And the way that we live has changed a lot in that time. So whereas in the past, the kitchen might have been a sort of small room at the back where somebody else was doing the cooking, now, it's an activity that we want to share as a family or with our friends, and occupy a much more sort of premium premium space in the building. So, that's not always the right answer for people. Some people, it still makes sense to have a little cozy room where they can leave all the washing up and, spend their time elsewhere. So it's unpicking how people live, how they want to live, and I try to get away from asking clients to tell me what they want their house to look like, but how do they want their house to feel? How do they spend their time? When they think back to, when they were younger and they were imagining what it would feel like, reading to their children, reading bedtime stories to their children, or entertaining friends at the weekend, or waking up on a Sunday morning, or coming home from work after a difficult week. How did they want to feel in those moments? And then it's my job, I guess, to sort of think, okay, what are the magic ingredients of creating a lived environment that's like a magic spell that can give you that feeling?
My favorite kitchen that you've done is the space in Notting Hill, where you brought the kitchen to the front of the house.
Yeah.
And you've put some really comfortable chairs right at the window. So you've made it more of a cafe.
Yeah.
In some instances.
I know exactly what you mean. And it's funny because that's when we were doing the floor plans and, the clients and I were chatting it through, those two chairs next to the window look a bit uncomfortable on this floor plan of this large room. And they sort of challenged me on it. And I was like, no, I really think, you've told me how you live, and that's you all like being in the same room, but not necessarily like doing exactly the same activity at the same time together. And if we have these chairs here, then someone can sit and read while someone else is cooking and someone else is at the table. And also it gives us a chance to have this lovely lamp in the window that will catch your eye as you come home in the evening and welcome you into the house. And sure enough, I still, have, ongoing bits and pieces that I do with the family. And those chairs have been an absolutely favorite piece, and were the ones that got worn out through love first. So I think, I'm really love finding the opportunity to create a place rather than creating a space, a place where you want to be. And, those things aren't kind of what the shape of the room sort of dictates from a kind of obvious symmetry kind of way, but it's more about human-led. How's that room going to be experienced by the people and how they want to live in it and use it, and then creating moments to do that. In a photograph, what often looks best is a big vista, and people are attempted to sort of create a situation where you can throw a front door open and see right the way through. But actually, from a feng shui point of view, I don't know how good that is for the energy to sort of rush through the whole property. But also, when you're there, we're always drawn to corners. In restaurants, it's always the corner seat that fills up the first. We want to feel protected and held. We don't want to feel exposed and vulnerable.
Okay, you mentioned starting with the layout as sort of, the necessary first step. And I'm curious, like, what kind of exercises you do to work through layout challenges? Like, are there questions you ask yourself? Or, do you do lots of different drawings? Like, how do you, I guess, work through the needs and then the space and figure out how to make the layout better?
Yeah, so it's kind of lots of questions about how people live, how many people tend to eat a meal, and is that just sort of grabbing something on the go at the kitchen island, or is it actually sort of sitting down? How often do they really entertain? Do they do their own washing? Do they have someone help them? Do they have dogs? Do they have loads of school bags? Are they into sport, the sports kit? Are they a morning person or an evening person? Do they, enjoy watching television and hunkering down and all those things that they might feel like ashamed to admit to, that actually what they like more than anything is eating supper in front of the telly. Kind of dig all of that stuff out. They like to do big shops and bring home loads of stuff, or actually they just buy things a meal at a time, because all of these golden nuggets of information are so crucial to understanding how to piece a house's layout together to make it fit that family or that individual perfectly. And then it's thinking about, okay, all those things, when are they actually happening? What time of day? And relative to this building, where is the light at those times of day? So where is it relevant? So if you're watching TV in the evening, then it would be madness to make that the room which has the best morning sunlight, when actually you really like to have a cup of coffee somewhere in the morning. And, maybe that actually enjoying the natural light is right for that time. So it's overlaying what their different needs are, sort of transposing it onto the house and thinking about where the light travels around, so that you've got the right activity happening relative to the right level of natural light. And then sort of flowing from that is my choice on paint colors, because for me, that is how you join the dots, or, the paint colors enable you to sort of dial up the natural qualities of the room and quieten anything that, isn't a sort of winning characteristic.
Can we talk about paint colors? Because you choose the most gorgeous, lush, but also surprising paint colors. I mean, and I'm curious, like, where in the process you pick the paint color. Is it towards the beginning? I mean, you mentioned just now that you're maybe picking that soon after you pick the layout, or are you pulling fabrics first?
Yeah, no, for me, and it is back to front, because I think how you're meant to do it is to choose the rug first, or maybe the piece of art, and then the paint colors flow from that. And, wherever there is something like a piece of art that is a real driver, if that's something that the client is passionate about, then they'll take that into account from the beginning. But I think that paint is such a kind of magical toolbox of opportunity. If you've decided to decorate your house, you've almost certainly already decided to paint it. So what color it is no extra cost. So it's this wonderful free thing that's kind of at your disposal. And so, yes, once I've kind of figured out what space should be used for what, and then I will put in a furniture plan, because I think you need to stress test it. Okay, like if they are a family of 5 and like to sit together watching television, you need to make sure that you've got enough really cozy spots to sit in the room where you're going to do watch the television. And, as part of that process, I'll be thinking about lighting, because I think that is also fundamental to creating atmosphere. And then it's about paint color, and using combinations of colors, because that's really where the power of color comes. It's not in isolation, but it's in the degree of contrast with the colors that you pair with it. So a soft pink on its own is very calm. With a, soft white or a soft brown, it's equally calm. As soon as you put in a splash of yellow or a splash of red, then suddenly it's dynamic and energizing. So, it then comes back to, again, how is this person going to use this space? How do they want to feel in that occasion, in that moment? How can I use color to create that feeling?
Sometimes I felt like the accent colors were so just not what I could have imagined. And that was so delightful, right? Because there was always a little accent of red. You use red so much. But then, teals and pinks, and like, it was never a real scientific look to it, right? It has this very kind of
Intuitive,
whimsical, playful feel. And I guess I'm curious, like, when you've got a room kind of at 80%, where are you thinking, like, okay, I need an accent color. What's this going to be? And how are you, like, picking what that accent's going to be?
I think sometimes it's sort of judging it as like, is there enough contrast here? If I need to change the energy, how can I use an accent of color to either dial it up or knock it back a little bit? So I think I'm always coming back to that question of, how does the room want to feel? How can I kind of manipulate the ingredients in it to sort of really sort of crystallize that feeling that I want to have? I take inspiration from, having worked a lot in gardens. Nature's the absolute master, and it's so interesting to see what plants grow happily next to each other, because there's something about that intrinsic natural ease that works, and it's the same, light in different areas, in different territories, makes colors behave in different ways. And in this country, we have quite bruised skies, and the natural plant palette are quite bruised colors, sort of muted, dusty tones. And that's what works really well in our light. Whereas if you went to the tropics, you have a much clearer, brighter light. And the plants that grow naturally are these kind of hot, clearer, brighter colors that work really well there. And if you think about Greece, and you think of those sort of whites that have evolved naturally in that place and they work so well. But if you took that white and put it in a London flat, you'd be sobbing into your cozy armchair quicker than you can say whoops.
So it's really starting with the light that you have in your space.
I think the natural light. Yeah, and how that is relative to the volume, because if you have, a low natural light but a huge volume, then you might choose a slightly different if you have a small volume. And also just how much you're going to be in the space, because if you're going to be there a lot, like I'm just designing my new house in Bristol at the moment and thinking about how I treat the kitchen, where I'm going to be a lot. And it does have quite a lot of natural light. So I will use a lighter color palette, but the room directly above it, I will use less. And so I'm going to use a much richer palette, even though it has the same amount of natural light.
But it's a smaller space?
No, it's a Georgian townhouse. It's a Georgian townhouse, so it's all layered exactly the same. So they're exactly the same rooms, but used for different purposes.
Okay.
Come and visit.
I would love to.
That was so fun. Can we talk about pattern a little bit? Because I love the way you pair patterns together, and I'm a big stripe lover, but not as much as you, because you are like the stripe master.
I love the stripe.
I love you pair sometimes like tickings with other small scales. You've got large scales. Talk us through how you're building out your pattern and fabric palette.
So I think, to me, when a pattern has a graphic quality to it, which a stripe does, a check does, or even like a sort of graphic print, that sort of repetition, it becomes almost like a neutral. It's this sort of quiet thing that your eye can pass over in a way that if you have something figurative like a floral, then your eye stops because your brain tries to work out what it is it's looking at because it knows is being told something. And so, the stripes and checks for me work as these sort of non-pattern patterns to create more of a texture than a pattern. And then, so I would use those more liberally, playing with different scales. And, if you use different colors, different versions of the same color, then again, it's kind of not creating too much chaos. You've got movement without it being too hectic. So yeah, again, it's a bit like color. It's thinking about contrast. Each of these things feels so different according to what they're placed next to. But a number of stripes in a similar color placed next to each other can actually be relatively calm, whereas, lots of different stripes in lots of different colors would be thoroughly overwhelming. I think also thinking about the type of color, whether that's paint or in a fabric, for me, I always come back to colors that feel rooted in nature. We all know that nature restores us, and colors like a sort of shortcut to mainlining that power. But as soon as a color feels synthetic, then that's thoroughly undermined. That's actually quite taxing on our senses. And so, finding paints that have a high level of natural color pigment and finding fabrics that have organic dyes. And by organic, I mean vegetable rather than necessarily specific organic, are much easier to live with and more restful. And, also the fact that there's potentially a little bit less stability to the color than there would be if it was synthetic gives an unevenness to it, which gives a depth, which you see in a lot of vintage fabrics, which I like using as well. And that softness and romance, again, creates that sense of ease and the sense of a space having evolved over time rather than being just very much of a moment. Because as soon as a place is of a particular moment, that moment will pass, and perhaps the appetite for that particular look will also pass.
You also talk a lot in the book about finding the spirit of a home. And I wanted to find out how you go about that and what are some things that you're looking for when you're finding the spirit of a home.
So I always start with listening. I think if there's one thing that I can bring to the party, hopefully it's listening. And that's listening to my clients, but it's also listening to the building and the place, the setting in which the building sits. As soon as you start to dig, there's story after story of, why that building was built there, who lived there, who designed it, what was their intention, how's it changed over time, what's happened in the local area. And all these kind of layers contribute to the sense of place, and rooting that sense of place to the people who are there so that there's this effortless connection between both of them is, I guess, creating a sort of tapestry of all these different stories so that there's a meaning that is profound.
Have you ever been in a space and just been like, I don't know what to do with this? This space is too crazy.
The space is beyond me. No, I haven't. There have definitely been times when, it's taken longer to get there. But usually there's something, one of the hardest spaces, I think, was actually a church that was being changed into a restaurant. And those two things felt very at odds with each other. And I guess a church naturally has such a profound sense of place that to shift it from somewhere where one wants to be sort of quiet and reverent to where we want to encourage them to be a bit more irreverent and creating those sort of cozy moments within a sort of vast volume was tricksy, but we got there in the end.
How did you do that? Yeah, churches are awe-inspiring, right?
Yes.
By nature. And I think just the sound,
Yeah.
you want sound to echo in a church, but you don't want that to happen in a restaurant. How did you deal with all of that?
So it was coming back to that central philosophy of creating places rather than spaces. So I guess it was trying to sort of descale that volume by creating cozy corners. So we created sort of built-in seating. I think somewhere that does it very well is the Wolsey in London, which is a wonderful restaurant built in what was originally it's been at times a bank and a car showroom. And they sort of did a similar thing where if you go there now, and this is what we did, was that there are sort of moments of built-in seating, bringing the light levels right down so that you're creating pools of light where you want people to be drawn to rather than flooding the whole space with light, and creating sort of twinkly moments that have much more of a sort of sense of intimacy rather than the big bang.
I loved the Italian project, and I would love to talk through that one because well, first off, it's big. So there are just so many spaces to talk through, and you kind of went in a lot of different directions. There were some more monotone, neutral spaces. Then you have sort of these beautiful natural greens and blues. And then there were these pockets of red, which red is not a color that I feel like people use that often. And you did it so adeptly. And I don't know, red, I feel like people always talk about how difficult red is to use in terms of like how to pick the right red. I mean, even trying to pick the right red lipstick for me feels like
that's probably the hardest.
So I'm just like, how does she even pick all these different reds? Because it wasn't like there was a range of them, right? There was so many, some that were more rust and then some that were more cherry. So just talk us through this whole Italian project, because it was really, really like a wow moment in the book.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think it's a good example about how the power of color doesn't need to be about how loud it is. It's that actually, some of those rooms that were much more kind of a neutral palette, if you look closely, there's quite a lot of layers of different shades of white and sort of near white. And that creates a sort of depth without it needing to be bright colors. And most of those rooms, there aren't high degrees of contrast. What I've done is I've layered tones of similar colors so that whilst you have sort of moments of intensity, it's not overwhelming. I think it reflects the surrounding countryside where you've got the most incredible sort of colors coming through in nature, in what grows there, but also the way the light changes through the day and the color of the earth in different areas. I think the reds, like when you say the word red, you imagine a kind of London phone box or post box, but there's none of that red anywhere to be seen. They really are like the sort of Tuscan, earthy tones, the sort of terracottas through to kind of shades of rose and really sort of deep, dusty pinks. And so again, it's coming back to that thing about colors that feel natural, are really easy to live with. They don't feel overwhelming. They feel nurturing. I really did what we've talked about seeing how the family were going to use the spaces, what time of day, what light was at that time of day, and using color to play to the building's strengths and to sort of quieten some of the less good aspects. That whilst it's quite an extensive property in terms of there are lots of spaces, the rooms aren't huge, so, and it was the most gorgeous family who have actually become great friends. So I felt like a real true privilege to have the chance to work with them on it.
How many like paint swatches did you use of some of these red wall like this red wall color in the I guess it's sort of like a den with sort of like a built-in looking sectional maybe?
Sofa. Yeah, so we designed a modular sofa to fit into the space perfectly. And yeah, the walls are in a sort of, a pinky toned, dusty, corally red. And then the sofa fabric, there's a couple of different colors that are similar layered up, and then the cushions again are sort of tonally, and the thickness of the weave varies. So it's sort of, you feel enveloped by this color, but lots of different shades of it. Sorry, what was your question now?
How did you pick the paint color? How many reds did you try?
How many colors? I should pull this information off our schedules. Actually, I'd love to know how many paint colors. But yeah, usually at the start of a project, when the painter receives the paint schedule, there is, a few deep breaths need to be taken as we explain to them how many colors there'll be, and they sort of look at me like I'm completely insane. But by the end, they are like a passionate colorist who is sort of fascinated by all these different shades. So it's a fun adventure, and there's usually a conversation from the client. Do we really need another shade of blue? Like, yes, trust me.
So when you are picking the actual color for a room like this one, where it's so saturated, do you have an exact shade in your head that you're like, I'm trying to get to this color, like it needs to be just the right, kind of earthy terracotta? Or are you sort of pulling lots of options into the room and just seeing what sort of like works on the walls?
So it will start usually when I'm always carrying loads of paint charts around with me. And as soon as I've been to visit the property for the first time, my brain will be starting to sort of think about the different layouts and the different colors. And, other people, when they fall asleep, maybe are sort of like watching sheep jump over hedges. But I am always wandering around rooms and trying on different colors and different configurations in my mind. And I find it very easy to picture a space in my mind and revisit it after I've been to it once. So then in the studio, I can be looking at paint colors, and I have boxes of dark blue, mid blue, light blue, boxes of all these different colors. So I'll start pulling out sort of different paint cards and playing with combinations and seeing how they go. But, while I find it very hard to remember everybody's names, paint names, I find strangely easy to remember. So I can sort of dig something out. I kind of know, I know that that's going to be an interesting touch in this space.
I want to talk a little bit about your furniture line, and what that's evolved into, and how you got interested in building out your own furniture.
So a bit like sort of falling into interior design, the furniture design has kind of grown out of opportunities that I've found in front of me. So, garden design turned into interior design, designing people's homes turned into designing hotels, and designing hotels really has been part of what has pollinated the homewares business, particularly in COVID. We were, finding, with a hotel, you need batches of things. So whereas a residential project, I can find, interesting antiques or artisan made pieces. For a hotel, I might need 20 bedside tables or a run of 30 wall lights. And that's harder to find in that way. And I just found that to find things that met my high design ambitions with the sort of durability demands and the price point that was workable for a commercial project, there just weren't options out there. And when we were installing hotels during COVID, and shipping containers were getting stuck on a Suez Canal because a ship had wedged itself in place. It just really brought home to me where things were being made. And because I have, over the years, built up this incredible network of makers, I thought I really want to take matters into my own hands and make things that I can stand behind wholeheartedly and know that they are made with the integrity that I want to be able to assign to each of my projects. And so everything is made in workshops that we can get to in a day. All our upholstery is made in England. All our fabrics are woven in an incredible historic mill in England using organic cotton. And there are some things like our ceramics that we make on mainland Europe, again, family workshops that I can get to and back in a day. And they're all pieces that have grown out of a particular need. So, knowing that I need a wall light that can angle in a certain way so that it works next to a bed, or a floor light that's just the right height that, again, you can angle to read well or to pool light on upholstery. A bedside table that has somewhere to store books, because for the longest time I've got a pile of books next to my bed that I think I'm somehow going to absorb via osmosis rather than getting through to actually finishing reading each one. So I wanted to create a bedside table where there was room for a pile of books as well as a drawer for goodness knows what, and a dining table where you can squeeze lots of people around it by designing it so that the legs are set in from the edge so that you can fit lots of chairs around or have it against a window bench. And in fact, we've created a dining bench so that you can have that sort of banquette advantage, but without having to create a built-in piece of furniture. So yeah, everything that we've done has sort of been led by something that we know we need and use time and time again. So I guess our sort of mantra has been that everything be beautifully useful.
Yeah, and every one of those pieces that you make has a little bit of your stamp of that mix of traditional and modern and arts and crafts and whimsy, and really fun work.
Thank you. Well, I think the sort of, the arts and crafts movement was born out of this sense of sort of human first, and also marrying the sort of being able to see the trace of the human hand, celebrating craftsmanship, but bringing some of the efficiencies of the machine. And how do you blend those things together? And Gordon Russell, who is part of the Cotswold movement and the arts and crafts movement, or sort of followed after the arts and crafts movement, developed this idea of batch production so that you can have some of the efficiencies, but also still celebrate the craftsmanship.
I want to talk about the book a little bit in general, and I guess how you pulled the projects and how just the experience of writing the book was.
Oh, I feel incredibly lucky to have had the opportunity to write the book, and that Rizzoli approached me to be able to reflect on my most favorite projects from the last 15 years and revisit and reconnect with many of the homeowners and photograph them and remember the myriad of different craftspeople and tradespeople and dealers and all sorts of people who have, contributed to the projects in different ways was a real privilege.
The projects in the book probably were, you said, up to 15 years ago, and they would have had to have been completed before you got it photographed and printed and all that. So how do the projects that are currently on your list that you're working on now, how do they differ from maybe some of the things that are photographed in the book? And like, how is your I guess, client work evolving?
Well, I really enjoy learning a huge amount with each project that I do. And actually, there's nothing I like more than a brief that is completely different from something I've done previously. And, learning from the other professionals involved, learning from the client, from a collection that they might have put together. And so each project, I want to be very different from the one before. Projects that we're working on at the moment include an incredible Art Deco villa in Berlin, working on an old palace in Lisbon, in Portugal, a Bauhaus building in Amsterdam, an incredible garden. I mean, we were actually working on the garden as well, but an incredible house in Wimbledon in London, where an architect who worked on Buckingham Palace also worked on this house. And what else? And then an insane Queen Anne house in Barnes, also in London. So, the architectural styles are all over the place. And so the interiors need to speak to that. And so, doing the research, and that kind of it invariably takes me in different directions.
What about the colors? What kind of colors are you using in some of these projects?
Literally all sorts. I'm craving doing some projects that are actually really pared back in terms of color. Like, whilst I really enjoy color, I don't want that to be what everyone sort of thinks of me for, and so actually having the opportunity to do some projects which is all about kind of layered whites, which is, to some degree what I'm doing in my own kitchen. I'm really enjoying that sort of, how do you bring the depth and interest in other ways? So all sorts of colors. What I'm trying to think, what have been some of my favorite recent color combinations? I think the sort of, bringing in the kind of very faintest sort of custard tones and sort of mocha kind of cafe au lait with different shades of white is probably one of my favorites just now.
And even those descriptions are delightful. I'm not sure I would have ever called any paint color custard, but that sounds fabulous.
Creme anglaise, I should say, being English.
Yes. It's not off-white.
Not mine.
Love it.
Beats a boring beige.
Yes, for sure.
Grayish.
Well, the book was just a delight, honestly, and it's so cozy and comfortable looking and just surprising and just everything that you could possibly want in a book, and went great with a cup of coffee, or I also read it late at night in bed. So it was a really beautiful book.
Thank you. I'm so happy you enjoyed it. Really pleased you enjoyed it.
I know our listeners would enjoy it too. So can you tell everyone where they can find you, follow you, and pick up the book?
Well, please follow me on Instagram at Nicola Harding & Co. Also our NYX brand, NYX by Nicola Harding. Guess our book on Amazon or any of the bookstores that you guys have in the States. I'll actually be coming to the States a couple of times in the coming months. So I'm going to be at Dallas Design Week, where I'll be doing a couple of events, including at Brooks Thomas showroom where some of our stuff is. And I'm coming to Round Top in March, and also LA by Design. Please come and find me.
Yes. And anybody who loves layering and color and pattern, they have to pick up your book. It's absolutely stunning. So
thank you. Thanks, ladies. Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a treat to meet you all.
So nice to meet you.
Likewise.
That's a delight.
Please come and see us in our studio. And if anyone's coming to London, we're an open house, and we'd love people to come and see what we're doing here. Very welcome anytime. I'll put the kettle on.
Thanks, Nicola. That's our show. And that's our show. You can find all of the show notes on our blog, howtodecorate.com/podcast.
To send in a decorating dilemma, email your questions to podcast@ballarddesigns.net so we can help you with your space.
And of course, be sure to follow us on social media at Ballard Designs.
Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. And please leave us a review. We'd love to hear your feedback.
Until next time, happy
Happy decorating.
decorating.